Nitai Gopamanandi Hari Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishna Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shanti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Sasan Paschati Dasatari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya We're reading from your favorite canto, the fifth canto. Hare Krishna. What verse? What chapter?
11.
Chapter 11, text 2. Okay.
First, you may read from the Transcend Diary.
Oh, okay. Transcendental Diary. So we were reading yesterday about Indian man who had met Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was saying, so many religions that are cheating, and Bhagavatam specifically was written for those who don't want to be cheated, who want to get pure bhakti. Mr. Saxena told Prabhupada that he has been to the four corners of India, Badarik Ashram, Rameshwaram, Jagannath Puri, and Dwaraka, and has visited many big ashramas and spiritual centers. But that despite what is spoken in large gatherings, the caretakers of the tirthas are not practicing. Quote, this must be Prabhupada speaking. But if you see that practical life, you realize all these tirthas, they are no more than I guess this man is speaking, but if you see that practical life, you realize all these tirthas, there are no more tirthas now. All use that word. Shopping centers, what we call. In other words, he's saying that tirthas have turned into shopping centers. He listed off a few of the more well-known Mayavadi gurus who run courses of meditation and yoga, ranging from 15 days to 3 years. But in none of them has he found what he is looking for. Everywhere I found we are after peace. There is no peace there. Prabhupada told him that religion is obedience to God. This is the religion. God says, you surrender unto me. This is religion. So if one does not know what is God and where to surrender, then where is religion? Is it wrong for God to say that you surrender unto me? Can you say like that? If you don't know who is God and what is surrender, where is their religion? If God says surrender, is there any problem with that? If you say surrender, there's a problem. Surrender to me, that's a problem. But if God says it, no problem. Mr. Saxena, a humble and unpretentious person, agreed. How can you say? Prabhupada said that the problem is that the Mayavadis want to take the position of God. Everyone is God. I am God. You are God. This they are claiming. Mr. Saxena agreed and mentioned the so-called Bhagavan Rajneesh, who is currently popular. Was he ever in Germany? Yes, no? Maybe 90s, 80s? Prabhupada shook his head in disapproval. This is going on. People also do not ask that, how you can become God. That's also so foolish. They accept any rascal as God. That Rajneesh, what is he? He advertises Bhagavan. And there are many rascals, they accept him. What he has done. In other words, if you claim to be God, well, show me. What do you do? Like you're God? So like this, there was one incarnation of God, and they told Prabhupada he had a toothache, and he had to go to the dentist or the hospital. And Prabhupada said, God does not have toothaches. God is not controlled by pain. And this same incarnation had an incense business. And Prabhupada said, God is the wealthiest. He has all the money. He doesn't need an incense business. But people don't figure that out. God is incarnated and he started a business to make money, to support himself and his institution. What do you think? That's God? Now he has a toothache, he's running to the doctor. That's God. What do you think? How to stop it then, Mr. Saxena asked. Stop. But unless you are intelligent, how it can be stopped? Prabhupada asked him in return, if the people are not intelligent, the cheaters will cheat. That's the point. But Swamiji, mostly educated persons, PhD, DT, LIT, MA, postgraduates, they are followers of this. For an ordinary person, titles of learning are certainly impressive, but not for Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita it is said, Maya aparita jnana. They are supposed to be very learned, but actually they're fools. Maya parita jnana. These so-called educated, they are bereft of knowledge. They have no common sense. That I was asking this Dibachi as God. That also is ignorance. He does not know what is God. He does not know. We have got the definition of God. Aishvaryasya samagrasya viryasya ishaha shriyaha jnana vairagyayos chaiva shanam bhaga hitingana. That's the verse of the six opulences. Aishvarya samagrasya, that one who is in possession of all the wealth, viryasya, all strength, all faith, yasha, all beauty, all knowledge, and all renunciation, that is God. Now, so far Krishna is concerned, he showed all these things. Aishvaryasya. For example, Krishna married 16,000 wives. And for each wife, a different palace. And for each wife, 10 sons. Women require very nice accommodation, sons, husband. That is their ambition. That he fulfilled. Although he married 16,108 wives. This is Aishvaryasya, Samagrasya, Viryasya. This so-called rascal Bhagavan, who has shown this? Why shall I accept this cheap God? Show me something that you are. Show me something that you are God. In other words, show me, what can you do? 7 years old, Krishna, he lifted Govardhan Hill. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Take shelter of Prabhupada. You will never be cheated. People would ask Prabhupada, have you seen God? And Prabhupada would say, if you don't know what God is, what does it matter if I tell you if I've seen him? Like, you should know what God is. So we're reading from text 2 of the 5th canto, 11th chapter. Tataiva rajam urugiri hamedha. It's supposed to end on hamedha. Is that confusing? The first line ends with Gar Hameda, and the next line begins with Vitana. So, Tataiva Rajan Urugar Hamedha. Vitana Vidharu Vijim Bribete. Yeah, Breteshu, that's one word. Navera Vadeshu hi Tattvavada Kayena Shudho Nachakashti Sadhu Tataiva Rajan Urughar Hamedha Vitana Vidhoro Vrijambim Teshu. Wait a minute. There's supposed to be a dot under the R, so it becomes Vijrim. Is there a dot? No, it's hard to see. Yeah, it's Vijrim. Vijrim Bhuteshu, not Bite. Bu. Can you change the I to U? And make the dot under the R a little bigger so we can see it. Vidyoru. Vidyoru. Vijim Bhuteshu. I think it's Bhute. Well, maybe I'm wrong. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. You're right. It is Bhuteshu. I can't see, yeah. No, you don't have to change it, yeah. Biteshu, yeah. Okay. Vitana Vidjoro Vijim Biteshu. Vitana Vidjoro Vijim Biteshu. Naveda Vadeshu hi Tattvavadha. Naveda Vadeshu hi Tattvavadha. Prayena Shudho Nachakashti Sadhu. Prayena Shudho Tataiva Rajan Urughar Hamedha. Vitana Vidjoro Vijim Biteshu. Navera Vadeshu hi Tattvavada. Prayena Shudyo Nuchakashti Sadhu.
Tataiva Rajan Urugrahameda. Vitana Vidoro Vijim Biteshu. Naveda Videshu hi Tattvavadaha.
Naveda Vadeshu hi Tattvavadaha.
Prayena Shudho Nukashati Sadhu.
On your mark, get set.
Tataiva Rajan Urugarmeda.
Tateva Rajan Urughar Hamedha.
Vitana Viju Vim
vadeshu hi tattvavada.
Prayena sudu nakchakti sudu.
Shadu.
Tateva rajan uru vitameda.
Shadu.
Vitana vidyoru vitrimpiteshu.
Vitana vidyoru vijimvideshu.
Naveda vadeshu hitatvavada.
Navera vadeshu hi tattvavada.
Prayena sudonu shakasti saru.
Prayena shudyo nachakashti charu. Ladies? Vitana vidyoru vijimvideshu. Navera vadeshu hi tattvavada. Prayena shudyo nachakashti charu.
Tataiva rajan urugahameda.
Tataiva rajan urugahameda.
Vitana vidoru vishimviteshu.
Vitana vidyoru vijimvideshu.
Naveda vadeshu hitatvavadaha.
Navera vadeshu hi tattvavada.
Hayena sudo nu chakasti sadu.
Prayena shudyo nachakashti charu. Anyone else? Tataiva rajan urugahameda. Vitana vidyoru vijimvideshu. Naveda vadeshu hi tattvavada. I had a realization. You can't read this like German. You have to read this like English. Right? Because this is a transliteration for English. Right? Yeah. You know, and
English works better than German.
yeah, if you read it like German, it was meant for English. This transliteration is the English transliteration for Sanskrit. Okay. Go to the word meanings. Tata. Therefore. Eva. Indeed. Rajan. O king. Urukarhamedha. Rituals related to material household life. Vitana vidya. In knowledge that expands. Uru. Very greatly. Vijimviteshu. Among those interested. Not. Vedavadeshu. Who speak the version of the Vedas. He indeed. Tattvavadaha. The spiritual science. Prayena. Almost always. Shuddha. Free from all contaminated activities. Nu. Indeed. Chakashti. Appear. Sadhu. A person who is advanced in devotional service. So this is Jada Bharat speaking to King Rahugana. And as you remember, King Rahugana did not understand how advanced Jad Bharat was, because Jad Bharat was playing the role, basically he looked like a crazy person. Jada means dumb or dull. So he didn't want to associate with materialistic people. So he acted in a way that no one would bother him. So he kind of acted like he was crazy. And so Srila Prabhupada would say, I think it was, quote, Chanakya Pandit, that no one will know what you're like until you start speaking. You won't be able to tell if someone's a fool until they start speaking. Which is why I never spoke in Prabhupada's presence, because I think then he'll know I'm a fool. And so Jad Bharat had not spoken. Before he had spoken, then King Rahugana thought, there's some foolish person, like can't even carry a palanquin properly. Right? Like if I asked you, can you bring me some water, and you bring me some milk, I think, what's wrong with him? Right? Ask for water, I get milk. Something's wrong. Or you come back, I ask for water, you come back 2 hours later with milk. You know, something's wrong. So that's how King Rahugana was thinking. Something's wrong with Jad Bharat. He can't even carry a palanquin. And then he found out, he didn't want to step on any ants, which is, most people do not have a problem stepping on ants, right? Because they're just ants, right? Devotees don't step on ants sometimes. Prabhupada would see an ant, and he would tell the servant, put the ant on a flower, the ant's hungry, needs to eat. Prabhupada cared about ants. What to speak of stepping on them, he cared about feeding. When was the last time you fed an ant? When was the last time you saw an ant and you worried about the ant's not getting enough to eat? Yeah. Translation. My dear king talks of the relationship between the master and the servant, the king and the subject, and so forth, are simply talks about material activities. People interested in material activities, which are expounded in the Vedas, are intent on performing material sacrifices and placing faith in their material activities. For such people, spiritual advancement is definitely not manifest. So, if you go to the Vedas, you can learn how to karma kanda, how to get good karma. So in your next life, you won't have to take birth in Germany, you could take birth on the moon. Or even maybe Brahma Loka, and then you can really enjoy. So the Vedas teach you how to do sacrifices and worship of demigods and other rituals to create good karma, so your material life will improve. That's what he's saying here. Sound good? Gonna go out and buy the Vedas today? Go to the store and find out how you can become a beautiful demigod in your next life, live 10,000 years, or live a day of Brahma, 311 trillion. You never get old, stay young. Fantastic. You can enjoy like anything. Don't do it. Purport. In this verse, two words are significant. Veda Vada and Tattva Vada. According to Bhagavad Gita, those who are simply attached to the Vedas and who do not understand the purpose of the Vedas or the Vedanta Sutra are called Veda, Vada, rataha. Vada means like one who sticks to something. Like we say Mayavada, Ritvik Vada. It's a new philosophy, Ritvik Vada. It's like a philosophy. So Veda Vada. These are the people that are attached to fruitive activities. So then, Shnabharaya Krishna Krishtaya Bhutale Gaura Gaura Nitai. So Prabhupada quotes two verses from the Gita, chapter 2, text 42 and 43. Yam imam pushpitam bhacham pravadhantya avipaschita vedavada rata parta nanyad astiti vadina kamat mana swarga para jnana karma pala pradham kriya vishesha bhavantam bahulam bhogaishvarya gatim prati. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say there is nothing more than this. In other words, they're prepared to stay perpetually in the material world in rising up the corporate ladder, in this case, the universal ladder. You can go to the heavenly planets and your cups will be made out of diamonds. Your body will have no odor. The roads will be made out of coral or pearls. Sound good? The best part is you don't have to work hard. There's only one problem. Sometimes the demons come up there and harass the demigods. The Vada followers of the Vedas are generally inclined to karma kanda, the performance of sacrifices according to the Vedic injunctions. They are thereby promoted to higher planetary systems. They generally practice the Chaturmasya system. Oh, you want to hear an interesting story? There was a very, very renounced and strict sannyasi in Mayapur. Very, very strict. As we say, paka, very paka, perfect. One person asked him, "How is it that you're so strict?" He said, you won't believe this, but he did say this. He said, "Because by doing all this chaturmasya and other sacrifices, in my next life, I will get a beautiful wife in the heavenly planets. That's why I'm doing all of this." Hare Krishna. Hard to believe, right? Others argue that this is not the purpose of the Vedas. Tad yataiveha karma jitaha loka shiyate evam utra punya jita loka shiyate. In this world, someone may become very highly elevated by taking birth in an aristocratic family, by being well educated, beautiful, or very rich. These are the gifts for pious activities enacted in the past life. However, these will be finished when the stock of pious activities is finished. Did you know that suffering is not such a bad thing? Because when you suffer, you're getting rid of bad karma. Did you know that? I think you should go out and suffer a little today. Of course, we're suffering enough, yeah. We don't have to try. And when you enjoy, you're getting rid of good karma, because you're paying for it with your good karma, your material enjoyment. So you're burning up karma by enjoying and by suffering. And if you understand that you're burning up your good karma by enjoying, then you'll think, I have to create some more. It's like making money. I don't have much money left. So I'll go make some more money. Get some good karma, put it in the bank, then I can enjoy. That's how it works. And this explains why Indian people, in general, flock to temples and seem very religious. But they're trying to keep their stock of pious credits out of the red. That's why. Right? You've seen that? Right. We don't care so much about piety and impiety, we just care about service. But if you're raised in this culture where you have a scorecard, sin and piety, you want to keep the pious actions greater. And therefore everything is based on material enjoyment. And that's why in India it's very strange for us to learn that when a young man wants to become a devotee, it's extremely rare that his family is favorable. And you would think, well, they're all Hindus and their son is becoming a brahmachari, they should have a festival. And they say something like, you can do that at the end of life. This will ruin your material life. You need to be well educated, make a lot of money, have a nice home, children, and so forth. Did you know that? That's very common. One devotee told me his mother said, if you move in the ashram, I will come to the ashram and commit suicide. Yeah. And sometimes you'll see that these people are very pious and very religious, but they're very materialistic, and you're trying to understand why. That's seated in the culture. That's what you're supposed to do. If we become attached to pious activities, we may get these various worldly facilities in the next life and may take birth in the heavenly planets. But all this will be eventually finished. Shinye punye martya lokam vishanti. Bhagavad Gita 9:21. When the stock of pious activities is finished, one again has to come to this martya loka. According to the Vedic injunctions, the performance of pious activity is not really the objective in the Vedas. The objective of the Vedas is explained in Bhagavad Gita, Vedascha sarva aham eva vedya. The objective of the Vedas is to understand Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who are Veda-vadis are not actually advanced in knowledge. And those who are followers of the Jnana Kanda, Brahman understanding, are also not perfect. However, when one comes to the platform of upasana and accepts the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes perfect. Aradhananam sarvesham Vishnu aradhanam param. The Prabhupada's, he's making a point, and a lot of people could argue with this, but he's quoting verses to support every point he's making. Because if they're Hindus and they're basing their lifestyle on the Vedas, now Prabhupada's quoting the Vedas to show that you've misunderstood. This last verse Prabhupada quoted means, of all forms of worship, worship of Vishnu is the highest. Because they'll worship demigods and we'll say, no, you should worship Vishnu, it's higher. In the Vedas, the worship of different demigods and the performance of sacrifice are certainly mentioned. But such worship is inferior because the worshippers do not know that the ultimate goal is Vishnu. Nate vidu sarto gatim hi Vishnum. That's from the Prahlad Maharaj. In other words, Prabhupada's saying something, and then he's quoting the verse. And that what he just said is basically what that verse says. Okay. When one comes to the platform of Vishnu, Aradhanam, or Bhakti Yoga, one has attained the perfection of life. Otherwise, as indicated in Bhagavad Gita, one is not a Tattvavadi, but a Vedavati, a blind follower of the Vedic injunctions. Tattva means truth, so Tattvavadi means one who has understood the truth. And Vedavadi means one who's attached to the Vedas, not necessarily one who understands the Vedas, but attached to Vedic rituals. A Vedavadi cannot be purified from material contamination unless he becomes a Tattvavadi. That is one who knows Tattva, the absolute truth. Tattva is also experienced in three features. Brahmeti, Parama, Eti, Bhagavan, Iti, Shabhyate. Even after coming to the platform of understanding Tattva, one must worship Bhagavan, Vishnu, and his expansions, or one is not yet perfect. Bahunam janmanam ante gyanavam mam prapajate. After many births, one who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto Krishna. The conclusion is that unintelligent men with a poor fund of knowledge cannot understand Bhagavan, Brahman, or Paramatma. But after studying the Vedas and attaining the understanding of the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is supposed to be on the platform of perfect knowledge. So Prabhupada said in the early days, he said, if you read Bhagavad Gita, you won't understand it unless there's purports. So you pick up the Vedas, what will you understand? So when I'm reading this purport, I'm thinking Prabhupada is making everything quite clear, right? What generations of Indians have not understood, this one purport, it's all there. You hear this purport, you understand more than most people in India. And then you go to India and you preach this to the Indians. You Westerner go to India and preach to the Indians this simple truth which they don't understand. And so as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, how fortunate are we that Prabhupada made everything clear. And we have so much proof of this, as this man was saying yesterday, the day before on Saturday, he was saying, this was the man I was telling you about that lives near Vrindavan. In the general area, if you could call it Vrindavan, still 20, 40 kilometers, it's still greater Vrindavan. He lived there and he didn't know that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's really crazy. It's Vrindavan. I mean, if you don't know Krishna's God in Vrindavan, that was a shock to me. And how could you not know? And he said he didn't know. And it was only until he came to Germany and got one of Prabhupada's books that he understood. And there's so many stories like that. So many Indians do not become Krishna conscious until they leave India. And hear from Srila Prabhupada. There's your proof. And we're reading these things, and we've heard them many, many times, and we're thinking, oh yes, I know this. This is simple, ABC, Bhagavad Gita. And it's true. It is simple ABC. Most of the verses Prabhupada quoted here were from Bhagavad Gita. Simple ABC. Simple for us, because we heard from a pure devotee, but not simple for the average Indian. And then as we're reading in the Transcendental Diary, because of this, not hearing from the pure devotee and hearing from so-called gurus and grandmothers who misunderstood and so forth, as it's been passed down, then these incarnations show up and people worship them. So sometimes we say, Prabhupada saved us. So now we can understand what that means, he saved us. He took something potentially very complicated and he made it very simple. So any one of you know more than your average Hindu on the street in India. Even if you just been in the temple for a month. Did you know that? Yeah. They're very mixed up. Yes?
The Christians also say that Jesus Christ saved them. What is the difference between he saved them and Srila Prabhupada saved us?
Yeah. I think the difference is one is theoretical and one is practical. You know, we can't say that Jesus cannot save them, but we can question whether the ones who believe they're saved are actually saved. Because for us, you know, when we say we're saved, what are we saved from? Really the three modes of nature. Because according to the modes, you will take birth. And if you're transcendental, you'll go to Krishna. And if you're in one of the modes of nature, you'll take birth in that mode. So, meat eating is in the mode of ignorance. So, and there are a lot of Catholic priests who are addicted to wine. So they're not saved from meat eating. A lot of them are not saved from wine drinking. They're not saved from going to football games. They're not saved from going to rock concerts. You know, what are they saved? So, when you compare it to Krishna consciousness, you see the devotees, at least who take to Krishna consciousness properly, are saved from these things. You know, for us to say, is my grandmother going to heaven or not? It's not, you know, it's difficult to say, because you say my grandmother went to church every day of her life and prayed and read the Bible every day, and who am I to judge? But we also have this description, that according to the modes you die in, the mode that's predominant, you will take birth in that mode. So that's there also. Prabhupada had no problem with any religion. His problem was professing to be a follower of Jesus or Muhammad or whoever, but not following them. That was his contention. That's why he used the meat eating example. Well, why don't you follow Jesus? So he pointed out that was, you know, and when he spoke with priests, he would focus on this. which is interesting. And one time he was speaking with a cardinal, I believe it was a cardinal, this time in France, and the cardinal was a little frustrated because Prabhupada's technique was he would ask a question, and until the person could answer it properly, he would keep asking the question. And so Prabhupada was asking the question, and they were discussing, and the man thought, this is not so important. You know, it's just one little point, meat eating, you know, we all eat meat, it's not important. And so the man said, can we not go on and discuss something more important? And Prabhupada said, no. If you don't get this, there's nothing more to discuss. So that's interesting. I think we're a bit jaded because we're kind of used to religions where sinful activities are accepted. You know, in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada said that these Western religions are religions for Malechas and Yavanas. In other words, it's a religion for people outside the Vedic culture. So it's not that he didn't appreciate them, he just didn't appreciate they weren't following. So I mentioned the other day in class that once Prabhupada was asked, if one is a Christian, if one is a good Christian, what would they do? And he said they would do the same thing we do. They would follow 4 principles, and they would glorify God. Prabhupada wasn't, of course, Mahamantra is the Yuga Dharma, but more broadly, glorifying God is the Yuga Dharma. So Prabhupada was okay, because we all have different relationships. So you have a relationship with Jesus, maybe that means you see God as the Father, okay, no problem. You can cultivate that. And maybe after cultivating that, you can go further in another life. Or you can go to heaven. I think it was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said Jesus descended from Brahmaloka, so you go to Brahmaloka. Then you go to this 5th canto, you have read or you will read where people go for their sinful activities, how they suffer. Will they be free of that suffering by accepting Jesus? Yes. Yes, but if you're free of that suffering, you accept Jesus, Jesus forgives you. And then you commit that same sin again. So how many times will he forgive you? Even devotees ask Prabhupada, will you forgive us if we fall? Prabhupada said, yes, I will. He said, but if you keep sinning, especially consciously, thinking you'll be forgiven, that Krishna may not at some point. So now what complicates this Christianity problem is the people don't know what they're doing is wrong. So if you know this is right and you don't do it, you definitely suffer more than if you don't know. Or you think the wrong thing is right because that's what you've been taught. So in the Gita, Krishna talks in several places about transcending the modes of nature through surrender. That's what happens. When you become Krishna conscious, you transcend. And so you have stories of sadhus in the Christian religion who did severe austerity and so forth. They're not saying that you don't have any transcendental sadhus, but you don't have an ashram of brahmacharis who 20% are addicted to alcohol. It wouldn't happen. Or they're skipping out to McDonald's when nobody's looking. That doesn't happen because we have a process which is transcendental. So, I can't make any judgments on where they're going, but at least we can see the effectiveness of the process. Of course, you could say, yes, but there's so many devotees who are struggling. That's true. But there's so many who aren't because they're following more strictly. So if you compare Christians to devotees, you'll see, even in the Christian religion, the leaders, wasn't it one of the popes said veal was, maybe 20, 30 years ago, one of the popes said veal was his favorite food. Veal is baby calf. He said, this is my favorite food, my favorite meal. Hare Krishna.
Can you repeat it?
Veal. Veal is the meat of the calf. And one of the popes said that was his favorite food. What do you call it in German? Well, we don't even have to discuss it, but anyway. The calf is taken, Prabhupada says in the Bhagavatam, the calf, the baby calf, is taken away from the cow for reasons we cannot describe on these pages of the Bhagavatam. Because it's like a special kind of meat. And that was the favorite meat of the Pope. Hare Krishna. It doesn't get any worse than that. Because Prabhupada said, if you want to eat meat, then, okay, just don't eat the cow. Because the cow is dear to Krishna. And the cow is beneficial for human society. Eat some other animal. And here, the head of the biggest religion in the world, his favorite food is a baby calf. Hare Krishna. Something's wrong. Something went wrong in the 2,000 years after Christ departed. Actually, something went wrong in the first 100 years because no one who was with Christ actually wrote the Bible. Or they weren't even literate. How could they write? Where we have Shastra from the time of Krishna. So we're in a little better position. Yes?
And before Jesus was about to leave, he also told his people, I have so many things to say,
Yes.
but you won't understand.
Yeah.
So that's even a statement from him
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
That there's a higher knowledge that what is there.
And of course, what is in the Bible is filtered out from many other books and many other of his teachings. So the principle that we learn is that sincerity will never be defeated. So even if one is misguided spiritually, if one is sincerely looking for God and wants God, you'll get God somehow or other, this life, another life. And many of us have that experience, right? We went through this meditation process or this religion. Finally, we came to Krishna. Yes?
They also say the religions are the stepping stone to the higher knowledge, like the Sanatana Dharma. That religion can practice you how not to do sin. That's like getting to the first class, but the first class is not the highest knowledge.
Yes.
And we are in a university, but you don't need to tell someone that, as an example, the first class is not necessary. It's necessary, but it's not
The goal,
highest.
not the goal, yeah. Yeah. Sometimes Prabhupada calls it sub-religious principles, upadharma, moral principles, being a good person and so forth. I mean, I think the beauty of Christianity is that, I don't know about today, but still, in most places of the world, aside from Northern Europe, most people believe in God, and that was the effect of Christianity and Islam. Having said that, in China, very few people believe in God, and most devotees didn't have religion, or they were Buddhist or they had no religion before they became devotees. So Prabhupada's relationship with Christianity was, was a little mixed. He appreciated it, and he would sometimes say, our goal, our mission is the same, why don't we work together? We should work together. But that's after him pleading with him, please don't eat meat. I don't know if they do this in Spain, but in Mexico, I don't even know if they do it anymore, but they have bullfights where they kill the bull. They do that in Spain? Yes. So when Prabhupada was in Mexico, he was speaking to priests and he said, you should stop this. This is sinful. You should get the government to make this illegal, bullfights. And these priests didn't understand anything. They couldn't. It was like Prabhupada was speaking something from another planet. And they couldn't entertain Prabhupada's idea. They just tried to change the subject. And we think of a bullfight, we think, this is the worst thing. One of the worst things going on this planet. And Prabhupada said, in the Bhagavatam, if you stop the killing of cows, no, he didn't say it this way. He said, every problem in society is a consequence of animal killing, killing cows, specifically killing cows. Every problem. So you can analyze politically why there's war. But the karmic reason is because we're killing animals. And these other political reasons are byproducts, secondary reactions. They're not the real cause. You could say, well, it's Putin. It's not the real cause. He's just being a puppet in the karmic reaction that the animal slaughter is responsible for. So it's right there in the Bhagavatam, every problem could be solved if we just stop eating meat. Now you could imagine you become the Prime Minister of Germany and the first law you enact is that it's illegal to eat meat. You'll go to jail if you eat meat. Yeah, you probably would be dead that evening. Right? Maybe that afternoon. Yeah. We have an amazing job ahead of us. We have to convince people to stop doing the things that they love to do the most. Meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication. We're trying to stop them from doing this. Practically impossible. Right? In America, sometime in the 1920s, they made alcohol consumption illegal. Did you know that? So once the law was passed, all the alcohol in America was taken out of the stores and all the bottles were broken.
What a cool day.
So what did people do? They made alcohol at home. They made alcohol at home. Of course, Prabhupada said, if you want to eat meat, don't eat the cow and kill the animal yourself. So he was okay with that.
You said in the beginning often, if you have to eat meat, eat fish.
Yeah, fish
and
or...
In Puri and in India, there are temples who offer fish. What is
Well,
that?
the pujaris,
You
I don't know if they offer fish, but the pujaris eat it. But they don't consider fish.
Yeah, they offer it as prasad.
Yeah, they think it's not. They think it's vegetarian because it's fruit of the river, fruit of the ocean. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah. So So Prabhupada would say, all right, if you want to eat meat, that's fine. Don't eat the cow and kill the animal yourself, because that will minimize meat eating. He said, but don't open factories where you're slaughtering millions of animals. This is extremely sinful. So there's allowance for these things, but not on an industrial level. It's okay, you kill it. You know, see what it's like to kill the animal. You know, that. Number one, you'll have to get an animal, and for most people it's too much trouble, and most people couldn't stomach slaughtering it. So it was meant to eliminate it. And you know, if you do it the Vedic way, then you have to chant a mantra, mamsa. Mam means me and sa means you. And so this mantra is given to discourage you, because you're chanting a mantra that in the next life I will be the animal and you will kill me. That should discourage you.
The Russian word for meat is similar to mamsa, мясо.
Ah, yeah, interesting. Hare Krishna. So, it's not that everyone in society will be a Paka Vaishnava, but the idea of Varnashram is it leads you slowly to Krishna. So if you enact these kinds of laws, then gradually people will move away from sinful activity. But if you just try to change the law, could you imagine a country that's addicted to alcohol? These cold countries in Europe, they must consume lots of alcohol, especially in the winter. There'd be riots in the street. So, Prabhupada's point was, you can't change laws without purifying the people. Because if they're purified, then they don't want these things. Then you don't even have to change the law, because there'll be no market for them. But if you just change the law without education and purification, then you'll just have riots, right? If they passed a law in Russia, that alcohol was illegal, do you think there would be riots? Some unrest would be there, right? Because, it's an addiction. In the last 20, 30 years there, Starbucks became very big. We didn't have, places where you got coffee when I was a kid was just a restaurant. You could go in and get coffee, but it was a restaurant. So Starbucks came and just coffee, right? So if you go to the airport in the morning, there's big long lines, whatever it's Starbucks or some coffee place. There's big long lines, 6 a.m., 7 a.m. Because everyone's addicted to coffee. And they're having withdrawal because they've been asleep for 8, 9, 10 hours and haven't had any coffee yet. So you have a whole society addicted to tea and coffee. How you could say, okay, coffee and tea is illegal. You'll have a whole society of withdrawal symptoms. People will go crazy. Right? That's what we're dealing with. So until there's a Varnashram society, we'll preach and intelligent people will come here and there. But something bigger has to happen if we're going to make an impact. Hare Krishna. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
Hare Krishna, thank you for this nice lecture. I have one question. I don't know, maybe this question is not appropriate. Recently I listened to a lecture, and in this lecture it was told that you on Ekadashi day you went to an ashram and you chanted with Akinchana Krishna Das Babaji. So maybe you can tell something from this day.
Oh, I did? No, that was I think B.B. Govinda Maharaj.
Are you sure it was Mahatma Prabhu?
No, it was B.B. Govinda Maharaj.
I think so. I thought like that it was taught that some disciples went there and with big recorder and so on to
Yeah, it was B.B.
record,
Govind.
and then they say, no, stop this and just chant and so on.
It was B.B. Well, I know B.B. Govinda Maharaj chanted with him, and he said that the taste he got from chanting with him was unique, intense, deep. And Akinchana Krishnadas could just chant non-stop. And he said in his presence, he chanted all night. He couldn't, as I remember the story. Was that the story? Chanted all... Anyway, the story I heard was they chanted all night. That only because of his presence could they do that. But at the same time, when Prabhupada was asked, Prabhupada said, okay, chant 25 rounds on Ekadasi or more. But when he was asked, should we stay back and just hear and chant? He said, well, for the preachers, they shouldn't. They should go out. And if you're like a pujari or something, and you have time, then you can do more. So, Prabhupada's vision of austerity was spreading Krishna consciousness. That he always considered that the greatest austerity, and he would never generally advocate austerity that would get in the way of preaching. It was always, austerity is good, but if that austerity now minimizes the preaching, no. So there was a story. So one of the Sankirtan leaders, when he heard, they confirmed that Prabhupada said, yes, you should chant more in Ekadasi. So the devotee said, does that mean all the Sankirtan devotees should stay back? And Prabhupada said, no. He said, that's for the people who have nothing to do. They can just chant. And then, you may have heard this story that in Gaudiya Math, there were, devotees who could chant 64 or 84 or 104. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would encourage them to go out and preach. And Prabhupada said that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta sometimes would encourage him to encourage these godbrothers to go out and preach, not just to stay back and chant. That was considered a greater austerity and a higher service. You have to be careful in bhakti that whatever you do, you may do it because you have a taste. But you want to be careful that you're doing it, what you're doing is pleasing to Prabhupada. Not just pleasing to yourself, like, I like to do it. Sometimes devotees would like to do something which is Krishna conscious, but it wasn't what Prabhupada wanted them to do. So there's a problem. Like, what's wrong if I do this? It's Krishna conscious. Nothing's wrong with it, except that Prabhupada doesn't want you to do it. Now there's something wrong with it, even though maybe it's book distribution. You heard that story from Shrutikirti? As Prabhupada's personal servant, Prabhupada wanted him to always be with him, never be away. And one day, Shrutikirti just decided he would go to Mangalarti. 4:30 in the morning, it's only a half hour. But he never went to Mangalarti because he was always with Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada called for him, but he was at Mangalarti, so Prabhupada called for his secretary and said, bring him. And then when he came, Prabhupada said, your duty is to be by my side 24 hours a day, and you should not go to Mangalarti. So if you look at Prabhupada's letters, probably 1,000 times he said, go to Mangalarti. So, but in this case, he's saying don't. So now what do? Now even though he said 1,000 times go to Mangalarti, but he tells you don't, now you're disobeying his order by going. Say, but Mangalarti is a spiritual activity. I like Mangalarti. I want to go. But now Prabhupada said don't go, so you can't. I mean, Shrutikirti can go now. But when he was the servant, he didn't want it. I have another, you want to hear another story? So Prabhupada had a secretary, and the secretary wanted to give up his service because he felt he was becoming too familiar with Prabhupada. And he said, Prabhupada, it's really difficult, because I'm like with you all the time, and everyone has this very reverential attitude towards you, but I don't. I have this, it's like you're my friend, and I want this more reverential attitude, and I want, to leave this service. He was a GBC, and I said, I will continue my service as a GBC. But he was a very good secretary, so Prabhupada was attached to him. And so he really wanted to leave, and he was not chanting, he was maybe chanting 4 rounds because he was always busy. He said, but Prabhupada, I'm only chanting 4 rounds. And Prabhupada said, don't worry, I will maintain your spiritual life. And then this devotee told me, he said, the next day in class, Prabhupada said something very interesting. He said, don't try to make spiritual advancements, just try to please your spiritual master. And when he said it, he was looking at that devotee. And then I heard something yesterday, which is kind of the icing on the cake of this. I don't know the source, but a devotee was saying that Prabhupada asked a question, what is the most important verse in the Vedas? And devotees were giving different answers. And then Prabhupada said, nobody got the answer. Apparently no one got the answer right. So Prabhupada said, Yasya deve para bhaktir yata devi tata guru. If you have faith in Guru as much as you have in Krishna, then all the Vedas will be revealed. Prabhupada said, that is the most important verse, faith in the Guru. So if Prabhupada says, do this, or if you do this, you'll get this result, or you don't have to do this, then we do that. So that's the idea. So you always want to, make sure whatever it is you're doing that you feel is good, beneficial, just, make sure that Prabhupada likes it. And he wouldn't say no. So if your service is to sit back at the temple and do nothing, then you can chant all day. If your service is book distribution, go out and do it. Prabhupada also knew, we were young and passionate. We just try to chant all day, we fall asleep. Some devotees said, well, Prabhupada, can we stay up all night on Ekadasi? Because that was also a tradition. Chant 64 rounds or more, you stay up all night. And Prabhupada said, you can stay up all night, but you can't sleep the next day. Because if you stay up all night and it's okay, you go to Mangalartik and then 5 o'clock in the morning you go to sleep and you wake up at 11, all you did was just push forward your 6 hours, where the point of Ekadasi staying up all night is to transcend sleep. So if you're capable of doing that, yeah, go ahead, do it. Most of us are not able to go a night without sleep and function well the next day. So let's say you normally distribute 50 Bhagavad Gitas every day, and then you stay up all night, and the next day you go out and you distribute 3 because you're so tired. Then Prabhupada would not be pleased. He said, just sleep. The greatest austerity is your Sankirtan, or your service. That's the most important. Does that make sense? Your greatest austerity is Sankirtan, preaching, your service, not your sleep. Your greatest austerity. Well, when you become Krishna conscious, sleeping will be an austerity. You won't like it. Prabhupada disliked sleep. And he disliked when we sleep too much. He would get on our case if we slept too much. Why are you sleeping? The karmis, they're working. You're sleeping.
Sleep is Maya.
Well, Chandramali Swami said that. Prabhupada said of all the propensities, eating, sleeping, mating, defending, oversleeping is the most contaminating, which is interesting. Anything else? Yes.
You said sleeping is contaminating. I heard in that sense that because when we are asleep, we are not conscious, and all our gates from our body pulls like poison out. Like when we're breathing anyhow. When we are, we pass, and like when we are from our mouth, we are snoring or something. Is that also? Is that the reason? Because
Well, he didn't explain it, but that could be part of the reason. I just made the assumption that it's an activity of ignorance. So if you're sleeping more than required, then you're cultivating tamagun, which is the lowest mode of nature, which is the furthest away from Krishna. It sounds funny and say, well, it's either going to be I sleep too much or have illicit sex. I guess I'll have illicit sex because it's not as bad, because that's in the mode of passion, but sleeping is the mode of ignorance. Sounds funny. But I think Chandamali Swami's, his realization was, if you cultivate the mode of ignorance, then all the other contamination will just come as a consequence. Like when you cultivate goodness, it's easy to become Krishna conscious, so if you cultivate tamagun, then passion and all other kinds of tamasic things will tend to become more attractive, or you'll be more inclined for those things. We know when we're sick and we have to sleep a lot, how it's very dulling to our consciousness, and we lose a lot of inspiration. So the more you're awake, the more you can cultivate Krishna consciousness.
11:30.
What time are we leaving?
11:30.
11:30. Okay. Well, it was nice being here with all of you.
Thank you so much for being here, Mama.
Nice seeing you again, some of you, and meeting some of you. And I have to leave today. Get ready.
You're very sad.
Are you seeing Guru Maharaj, Janana Goswami? He's also in Slovakia.
I heard that Chandamali Swami is there, but I didn't hear anyone else. Maybe Praladananda Maharaj is in Croatia. But Chandamali Swami is coming to the Japa retreat. That's what I was told.
Slovakia or
Slovenia. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Thai Go Premanandi. Sunyavadi Paschachitasitam. Hare Krishna.
Was a devotee, she bought the stick and she said,
Oh, okay. What's your name?
Anuttara Devidas. Anuttara.